Hi, it's Jim.
Hi, Mr. Chair. It's Ryan Teschner. Thanks for calling back in. So it looks like we have all board members on the line. Chief Saunders is on the line, as is members of TPS Command, members of board office staff, as well as police service staff. The deputants who have registered have called in and are now on the line waiting for their deputation to be called. Mr. Chair, please go ahead.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Hart, and I'm the chair of the Toronto Police Services Board. Welcome to this regular meeting of the board. As we continue to address the unique and difficult challenges presented by the pandemic, we felt that an online meeting was the right thing to do at this time. Mr. Teschner, can you go over the meeting logistics for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hart, and thank you to everyone who has joined this call. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed on the Toronto Police Service YouTube account and will be available there at the conclusion of this meeting. On the line, we have Chair Jim Hart, Vice Chair Marie Molineux, Mayor John Tory, Councillor Michael Ford, Councillor Francis Nunziata, and members Upala Chandrakasera and Ainsworth Morgan, as well as members of our board office staff. We also have Chief Mark Saunders, members of the Toronto Police Service Command, members of their staff, other members of the Toronto Police Service, and of course, members of the public who have signed up and registered to make deputations today. As per our regular meeting process, deputations will be heard after a presentation or description of the item is provided, and prior to the motion or substantive item being discussed and voted on by board members. When it comes time to do a deputation, those who have registered will be brought into the virtual meeting. As always, deputants will have up to 5 minutes to speak, followed by an opportunity for board members to ask them questions. With respect to voting, we would ask that when the chair calls a vote, any board member who wishes to vote opposed to an item, ensure that when the chair asks if anyone is opposed, you say yes clearly, followed by your name. This will allow us to ensure that we record that vote appropriately. The agenda and all items on the agenda, as well as the reports, can be found on the Toronto Police Service Board website at www.tpsb.ca under the Meetings and Agenda tab. I'll now turn the meeting back over to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Teschner. Members, we have a motion before us entitled Procedural Changes for the May 21st, 2020 regular public meeting of the Toronto Police Services Board in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Ms. Molineux, I believe you wish to move that motion and would like to give us some summary. Could you do that, Ms. Molineux, please?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Marie Molineux. I'm going to be giving you the context for the motion to proceed with this virtual meeting since the board is unable to hold an in-person public meeting at this time. So this motion, if approved, would permit the board to proceed with this regular public meeting with board members participating virtually. It will also, to ensure that members of the public can participate in this meeting, this motion, if approved, would also permit the board to hear deputations through electronic means. And finally, this motion, if approved, would allow members of the public to virtually listen to and watch the proceedings live by way of the, in this case, YouTube webcast. And these steps are taken to balance the importance of open and public transparent board meetings with the importance of protecting the health and safety of board members, members of the public, board staff, and Toronto Police Service staff. So the motion, which I will read, is I move that we permit at this regular public board meeting of May 21st, 2020, board members to participate in the board meeting virtually, board members to be deemed present for the purpose of quorum when participating virtually, and board members who are participating virtually to vote at this meeting. I recommend that we ensure this regular public board meeting of May 21st, 2020 remain open to the public and media through the use of live webcasting technology, and that a complete recording of this regular public board meeting be posted on the internet at the meeting's completion. I recommend that any deputations are to be heard in accordance with Rule 17 of the procedural bylaw. And finally, I move that the waiving pursuant to Section 4.4 of the procedural bylaw of any rules of procedure necessary to proceed in accordance with items 1, 2, and 3 of this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Mulliner. Members, do we have any questions of the mover of the motion? Hearing none, for this particular item, I will be calling a recorded vote. As I call your name, please indicate how you wish to vote. Vice Chair Mulliner?
I approve the move of this motion.
Ms. Chandrasekaran? Ms. Chandrasekaran?
In favor, thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Councillor Ford?
I am in favor.
Mr. Morgan? Mr. Morgan?
Sorry, I'm in favor.
Councillor Nunziata?
I'm in favor.
And Mayor Tory?
In favor.
That item is approved. Thank you. I will now read the Indigenous.
Mr. Chair, if I could just comment on a rule of procedure. We didn't have a seconder for that motion, so perhaps we could have someone second the motion.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. I believe Ms. Chandrasekaran seconded that motion. Is that correct, Ms. Chandrasekaran?
That Councillor Nunziata has seconded.
Councillor Nunziata. Sorry, Councillor Nunziata. I'm looking at it right in front of me. Councillor
Yes,
Nunziata, do you second that?
Yes, I have seconded the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's up in front of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will now read the Indigenous land acknowledgement. Although this meeting is taking place on the phone, we acknowledge the land we're on as we make this call as traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and now is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The board also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Before we begin this meeting, the board would like to take a moment of silence for Constable Heidi Stevenson of the Enfield RCMP detachment, who was tragically and senselessly killed in the line of duty on April 19, 2020. As we also keenly know, a police officer takes an oath to serve and protect the members of our community diligently, with dedication, and despite the considerable risks inherent in the profession, founded on ensuring the safety of the public, an officer who gives her life in the line of duty, protecting her community with extraordinary bravery and great commitment, as Constable Stevenson has done, has without a doubt made the ultimate sacrifice. By all accounts, Constable Stevenson was an exceptional police officer, an inspiring mentor, and a wonderful person. When we lose a member of the policing family, we all grieve as one together. Our hearts are with the family of Constable Stevenson and with the police officers across the country as we mourn her passing and honor her tremendous contribution to her community and the important legacy that she leaves behind. Along with Constable Stevenson, 21 members of the community were killed in this devastating attack. Today, we also pay tribute to their lives and honor their memories while holding their loved ones in our thoughts. I would now ask that we all take a moment of silence to honor Constable Heidi Stevenson, along with the other 21 victims of the tragic attack in Nova Scotia. Thank you very much. Members, do we have any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Hearing none, I'll move on. As we begin this board meeting, and on behalf of the board, I'd like to first start by speaking about the excellent work the members of the Toronto Police Service are doing in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the related challenges that this brings. This is without doubt a unique and challenging period in our history, an unprecedented time as we've had to drastically redefine what our lives look like. But for the members of the Toronto Police Service, the work continues. The job goes on. Policing is as important and essential as it always has been, arguably even more so. And while our lives have been completely upended, and indeed our members and their families too feel the upheaval within their own personal lives, professionally, they're steadfast, diligent, and dedicated as always to keeping our city safe. From enforcing physical distancing rules to creating a greater understanding of the rationale behind these rules to responding to calls for service that continue to come in, our service members have been working steadily with great commitment, despite the uncertainty that's part of the new reality for all of us right now. And each job they do, each duty they take on is done with sincere compassion, with extraordinary dedication, and with a genuine desire to see people remain healthy, to keep residents safe, and to encourage calm and civility. The role of our service members is complex and multifaceted. They're not simply focused on the enforcement of rules and laws. Their actions are grounded in care and understanding, and in the notion that we're all in this together. And the service members, while playing a critical role in the enforcement of the rules, are also partners in seeing our city's residents through this difficult time. I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight some of the extraordinary work we're seeing from our service members. One example is the incredible teamwork of the Parking Enforcement Unit, which has stepped up and gone beyond their usual duties in assisting with an unfortunate repercussion of the pandemic, an increase in commercial break-and-enters. Another demonstration of incredible work during this time is that of the resourceful and dedicated members of the Emergency Task Force, who created an innovative and comprehensive self-contained decontamination facility and process within their unit to provide rapid decontamination of team members' uniforms and equipment and return to operational status as soon as possible after a potential contamination with COVID-19. I'd also like to recognize our incredible civilian members who have also contributed in a variety of critical ways, such as the members in Fleet and Materials Management, who've worked quickly and diligently to ensure our vehicles are on the road, they're decontaminated, and they're safe. The members of Facilities Management, who promptly coordinated enhanced cleaning of our buildings, and our members in Records Management, who have helped to create PPE for healthcare professionals, another group of frontline workers to whom we all owe a debt of gratitude. There are also countless examples throughout our organization of our service members' extraordinary volunteerism, raising money, donating funds, and selflessly assisting in the community to help those most in need during this time. These are but some of the many, many examples we're seeing across the city as our service members respond to extraordinary circumstances with her characteristic dedication, compassion, and resilience. On behalf of the residents of the city and on behalf of the Toronto Police Services Board, I want to say thank you to the members of Toronto Police Service for your incredible commitment to keeping Toronto safe. Where the world seems to be so different from just a couple of months ago, where dynamics shift every day, we take great comfort in the fact that your role and your commitment remains unwavering and unchanged. We know that we can always depend on the members of the Toronto Police Service to serve and protect us. And for this, you always have our deepest gratitude. Thank you. Now, members, I'd like to move through the agenda, starting with item number 1, confirmation of the minutes from the meeting held on February the 25th, 2020, and the special tele-meeting on March the 26th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
This is Marie Molliner, Vice Chair. I move to approve the minutes of February 25th, 2020 and March 26th, 2020.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Do I have a seconder?
John Tory here, second.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that's carried. Item number 2 is held. That's a presentation from the Chief regarding the service's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Item number 3 is the policy regarding COVID-19 status information disclosure and occupational health and safety, infection prevention and control related to COVID-19. That is being held for deputations, and I understand Ms. Chandra Kasera wants to hold that item as well. Item number 4, request for special funds, Ontario Association of Police Services Boards 2020 virtual annual general meeting. Do I have a motion to approve that item?
Vice Chair Molliner, I approve the item 4, request for special funds.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder?
Michael Ford's happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 5 is the Toronto Police Services Board race-based data collection analysis and public reporting policy quarterly progress update on implementation. That is being held for deputation. I understand Ms. Chandra Kasera would also like to speak to that item, so that is being held. Item number 6 is the award of construction management services for the new 41 Division project. Do I have a motion to approve item number 6?
Mr. Chair, it's Michael Ford. Am I able just to hold that for a couple questions?
Absolutely. Councillor Ford, that'll be held in your name.
Thank you.
Item number 7, lease renewal agreement for the mounted unit exhibition place Horse Palace located at 15 Nova Scotia Avenue. Can I have a motion to approve that item?
Francis Nunziata, I'll move it.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. Can I have a seconder?
Vice Chair Marie Molliner, I second.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All in favor? Opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 8 is special constable appointments and reappointments, May 2020. We have a deputation on that item, so that item will be held down. Item number 9, Ryerson University Special Constable Program. We have a number of deputants on that item, so item number 9 is being held down. Item number 10 is the COVID-19 Emergency Board Delegates Decisions Report. Do I have a motion to receive that?
John Tory moves.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. Can I have a seconder?
Marie Molliner.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All in favor? Opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 11, independent civilian review into missing persons investigations, account for professional services. Can I have a motion to receive that report?
Francis
Marie
Nunziata.
I'll second Marie Molliner.
Councilor Nunziata, and seconded by Vice Chair Molliner. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 12, supply and delivery of the 220 Panasonic ruggedized laptops and associated equipment and service. Do I have a motion to receive?
Marie Mulliner moves to receive item 12.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mulliner. Seconder?
Ainsworth Morgan will second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 13. Item number 13, City of Toronto Council Decision 2020 Capital and Operating Budgets for the Toronto Police Service. Can I have a motion to receive that report, please?
John Tory moves.
Michael Ford will
Thank you, Mayor
second.
Tory. I didn't hear the seconder, sorry.
Michael Ford will second.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 14 is the capital budget variance report for the Toronto Police Service period ending December the 31st, 2019. Can I have a motion to receive that report?
Chair John Tory here. Can I just make a very brief comment, and then I'm quite happy to move it?
Okay.
I can
Go right ahead, Mayor Tory.
Well, just to say, I think, I know there's always a variety of reasons why the spending rate is, what it is, and it's lower than it needs to be. And we are trying to pick up our budgeting process at the city to make sure that these capital budgets more realistically reflect, in light of the scarcity of funds, what is actually needed and can be spent in a given year, as opposed to having sort of repeated numbers that happen all over the government, not just in the police, that are way, way below what's budgeted. And so I just want to make that comment, and looking at the results for 19, which are what they are. So that's why I'm happy to move it. But I just want to make that note. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Tory. Point well taken. Can I get a seconder, please?
Francis Nunziata.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none, that item carries. Item number 15, operating budget variance report for the Toronto Police Service Parking Enforcement Unit, year ending December the 31st, 2019. Could I have a motion to receive?
Marie Mulliner moves.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Can I have a seconder?
Francis Nunziata.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 16, operating budget variance for the Toronto Police Service year ending December the 31st, 2019. Can I have a motion to receive?
John
Marie
Tory moves,
Motion.
Chair.
Pardon me? I heard two at once.
Marie can move, and I can
Mayor
second,
Tory.
Chair.
Okay, great. Vice Chair Molinar has moved that. Mayor Tory has seconded it. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 17, operating budget variance report for the Toronto Police Service Board, year ending December 31st, 2019. Need a motion to receive?
Francis Nunziata.
Councilor Nunziata, and seconder?
Marie Mulliner.
Vice Chair Mulliner, seconder. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 18 is the annual report of the 2019 uniform promotions. That's being held down for deputation. Item number 19, annual report 2019 cooperative joint and consolidated purchasing. A motion to receive.
So
Marie
moved,
Mulliner
Mr.
will
Chair.
move item 19. I'm sure I heard someone else as well.
Is that you, Mayor Tory?
Yes, it's not a competition, but I'm happy to move or second.
Mayor Tory is moving it. Vice Chair Mulliner, seconder. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that carries. Item number 20, the annual report 2019 secondary activities. A motion to receive.
Francis Nunziata. I'll move it.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. Seconder?
Marie Mulliner will second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mulliner. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 21, annual report Labor Relations Council and legal indemnification, cumulative legal costs from January the 1st to December 31st, 2019. Need a motion to receive.
Marie Mulliner moves.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Seconder?
John Tory here.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 22 is the annual report write-off of uncollectible accounts receivable balances January to December 2019. I have a motion to receive.
Francis Nunziata.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. Seconder?
Marie Mulliner will second.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item 23, Annual Report 2019 Proof of Claim Documents filed on behalf of the Toronto Police Services Board. Need a motion to receive?
Marie Mulliner moves.
Michael Ford
Thank you,
will
Vice
second.
Chair. And Councillor Ford seconded. Thank you very much. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 24 is the Annual Report 2020 filing of Toronto Police Service Procedures. Vice Chair, did you want to hold that report?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's held in your name. Item number 25, Annual Report 2019 Toronto Police Services Consulting Expenditures. I need a motion to receive.
Marie Mulliner moves. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Seconder?
Ainsworth Morgan seconds that.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 26, Annual Report of the Toronto Police Service Board's 2019 Consulting Expenditures. Motion to receive.
I'll move this one as well. Marie Mulliner.
John Tory
Thank
seconds.
you.
Chair. John Tory here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none, that item carries. Item number 27 is the Annual Report 2019 Use of CEWs. We have a deputant on that, and I understand Ms. Chandra Tessera would like to speak to it as well, so that item is held. Item number 28 is the quarterly report for August the 15th, 2019 to November the 14th, 2019 CEW use. We have a deputant on that, so that item is held. Item number 29 is the Annual Report 2019 Parking Enforcement Unit Parking Ticket Issuance. We have a deputant on that. That item is held. Item number 30, Traffic Enforcement and Collision Reporting Processes relating to cyclists in the City of Toronto. Can I have a motion to receive?
Marie Mulliner moves to receive item 30.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Seconder?
I just, sorry, Mr. Chair, I apologize. Could I hold that for a question or two?
Yes, you can.
Sorry about that.
That will be held. That will be held in the name of Mayor Tory. Item number 30 is held. Item number 31 is public minutes of meeting number 69 held on February the 6th, 2020 of the Central Joint Health and Safety Committee. Item number 31, motion to receive.
I move to receive. Marie Mulliner moves to receive item 31.
Thank you, Ms. Molinar. Seconder?
Nicola Chandrasekhar can approve.
Thank you, Ms. Chandra Tessera. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. Item number 32, Chief Administrative Investigation of a Custody Injury to Complainant 2018-58. Can I have a motion to receive?
Marie Mulliner moves to approve.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
32.
Thank you. Seconder? Can I have a seconder on 32?
Ainsworth Morgan
John Tory
second
here.
that.
Okay. Mr. Morgan, I heard first, so Mr. Morgan, seconder. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that's carried. Item number 33, Chief Administrative Investigation into Custody Injury Complainant 2018-64. Motion to receive. Item 33.
This is Nunziata.
Thank you,
John
Councilor
Tory seconds.
Nunziata. And
John Tory
Rick
will
Tory,
second.
thank you. Thank you very much. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item carries. Item number 34, Chief Administrative Investigation of the Custody Injury to Complainant 2019-10. Motion to receive.
Marie Mulliner moves to receive number 34.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. Seconder.
John Tory.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. I will now review the items that have been held, and then we'll start going through the items. So first item is held is item number 2, presentation from the chief. Item number 3 is held. Item number 5 is held. Item 6, item 8, item 9, item 18, item 24, 27, 28, 29, 30. So I will now return us to the top of the agenda for a presentation from the chief regarding the service's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the chief will take questions at the end of his presentation. Thank you. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first, let me say thank you for your earlier comments on the acknowledgement of the tremendously hard work that the frontline and SWAN and civilian have taken place since this pandemic. What I will say is that there are some real significant keys to success to date, and I'll touch on them briefly. And first off is the fact that this is all based on a plan. So the Toronto Police Service, this was not reactive on our part. From late January, our specialists with pandemic from emergency management, public order folks were in constant alignment with all stakeholders of the city, as well as some private sector entities, to devise a plan that had a multitude of phases that would be necessary. And to date, the plan has been executed fantastically. And the second piece, which is critical to the success, has been the collaboration. And I do want to, at this point in time, acknowledge Mayor Tory, who has been working with Dr. Eileen Davila, who is our Chief Medical Officer, as well as Chief Matthew Pegg, who have been doing a phenomenal job with not just looking after the city, but keeping everybody knowledgeable and up to speed and listening and making sure that the questions of importance were answered. And through that, it has helped all of the first responders. To date, we have resources plugged into a multitude of collaborative entities. So starting with the Toronto Police Operations Center, as well as the Emergency Operations Center, which has all of the various touch points right across the city, working nonstop and constantly communicating to make sure that there is no crossover and that we're effective and efficient. It gives us opportunities of making predictions and making key and critical decisions when necessary, as well as the Major Incident Command Center. When you put all of those things aligned with the command strategic team, the information sharing has been continuously seamless. I can't say enough about the leadership teams that are in play that are constantly looking for up-to-date information and then processing it either through action or through developing any type of data or analytics to assist us to measure and ensure that we're doing what needs to be done. I'll speak a little bit to our business continuity. The numbers of calls for policing have been reduced, and it only makes sense. When you have less vehicles on the road, there are less collisions. When we have been lenient with parking, there are less parking complaints. But I want it to be readily understood that our frontline officers are going to more calls. So we have been going to more calls this year than we have last year. So it's not that things have slowed down. The frontline demands are still there, still in place, but our officers are attending these calls in a timely fashion with all of the necessary resources to make sure that the outcomes are as successful as possible. The one added element with the pandemic piece, as well as dealing with the calls for service, is the wellness factor. And I can tell you that there have been some building blocks that have allowed more opportunities for access to the wellness tools that are available. We have a 24-hour wellness line to assist and guide our members, and that has been utilized, as well as the information sharing once we make our decisions based on the science, through the knowledge, through the chief medical officer and all the other touch points. We have been successful in ensuring that our folks, their health has been looked after to the best of their ability. So once again, I do want to say thank you to the board and the chair, as well as the City Hall, for the tremendous cooperation and assistance. I know we've got a long way to go, but I can tell you that as the city reopens more, we will have the opportunity of ensuring that all of the right necessary resources will be there to provide adequate and effective and efficient policing for the City of Toronto. Having said that, Mr. Chair, I'd be subject to questions.
Thank you, Chief. Board members, any questions of the Chief? Hearing no questions, can I get a motion to receive the presentation?
This is Nunziata.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. Can I have a seconder?
Michael Ford.
Thank you, Councilor Ford. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. Moving forward to item number 3, which is the policy regarding COVID-19 status information, disclosure, and occupational health and safety, infection prevention, and control related to COVID-19. We have 2 deputants. Call the first deputant, who's Derek.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you fine, Derek.
Okay.
You have 5 minutes as usual, and start when you're ready.
I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied. In doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. And let the record show as person is defined as a corporation in the Legislation Act of Ontario. If I've ever led the Toronto Police Services and or the board to believe in any way that I am the person, then that would be a mistake, and that I ask all of you to please forgive me. And I have an actual deputation to make. As someone recently pointed out to me that the Statute Law Revision Act of 1893 repealed Section 2 of the British North America Act 1867. I appoint Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, the lady, not the corporation, to act as the trustee for me regarding matters involving the trust. So in this report it says, conclusion, further direct the chief to implement workplace health and safety measures, including infection prevention and control measures to limit the occupational spread and spread to the public of the COVID-19 virus, consistent with Toronto Public Health's direction and guidance and reports of the board with respect to implementation and compliance with these measures until the board directs this reporting is no longer required. If they truly mean that, then here's an idea. Now that the Toronto Police are no longer protecting the barricades outside of High Park, maybe they could find the time to get the City of Toronto to actually follow their own rules regarding physical distancing with the settlement agreement that was reached the other day before it went to court before Superior Court Justice Lauren Sawson. What good are the Toronto Police if we can't even get them to get the City of Toronto to follow their own rules? I'll add that it's about time the City of Toronto got a taste of its own medicine. And so for those who aren't aware about what I'm talking about, this is from CTV News. Mayor Tory says that a legal challenge by a group of organizations that support the homeless is disappointing, given the epic efforts that the city is taking to limit the spread of COVID-19 within shelters. So this is from Kathy Crow from off of something called the rabble.ca. Early on, it was apparent that Toronto's medical officer of health was not going to order shelters to ensure the 6 feet physical distancing of beds, cots, and mats. Even with the city's quasi-promise of hotel rooms for all who needed to ensure physical distancing, many of us knew the writing was on the wall. Homeless people were not being protected by a virus that would be deadly to them. In fact, the only real protection would be 1 person or family unit per room. The terms of this settlement agreement are, so everyone's aware, number 1, the city is required to use best efforts to achieve without delay and thereafter sustain 2 meters between beds, and end the use of bunk beds across the city's shelters, respites, and overnight drop-ins. 2, the city is required to provide shelter to all shelter system clients by making available such beds as is necessary to achieve physical distancing standards across the shelter system. 3, all individuals who received any support services from the city's shelter system since March 11th, including those now in encampments who left the shelter system because of fears of COVID-19, are included within the scope of the city's obligations under the settlement. 4, the city will report regularly on its progress until it reaches and sustains compliance for 2 measures. This is Kathy Crow continuing. It is deplorable that we had to go to court to achieve probably the most repeated and basic health measure we have all heard since the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. Physically distance 6 feet or 2 meters. The agreement will bring a measure of accountability and public transparency that has been lacking in the city's approach to dealing with the pandemic within the shelter system. The city is now required to provide regular, detailed reports about its efforts and progress in achieving and sustaining physical distancing standards that will surely save lives. This is from Jessica Orkin, a lawyer at Goldblatt Partners representing the coalition, said, regrettably, the city's commitment comes only after the tragic and preventable deaths of 2 shelter residents and over 300 COVID cases in at least 21 sites. 10 weeks into the COVID pandemic, the city has finally committed to ensure that Toronto shelters meet minimal public health standards for physical distancing. The coalition will remain vigilant to ensure that the city complies with its obligations under this agreement and is prepared to take further legal steps if necessary to ensure that people experiencing homelessness are supported during this pandemic. That's my time, and I just want to end off by saying I demand that Dr. Davila resign.
Okay, Derek, thank you for your deputation. Any questions of the deputant? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Derek. Move on to the next deputant, Sam Teckle.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, hear you fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
You have 5 minutes and start when you're ready.
Okay, thank you so much for the time. Just wanted to speak to the fact that I had some questions regarding this order, the access, use, and disclosure. So the information that's going to be, I guess, accessed through what's being called the portal, name, address, date of birth, and whether the individual has had a COVID-19 positive test result at any time in the past. It says that the police force will have authorized users identified by police services. This is not clear. It says authorized users in communication and dispatch services. Does this mean all members, those patrolling, or a specific dedicated department at communication and dispatch services? It also says the order establishes that personal health information about the COVID-19 status of an individual must only be used to prevent, respond to, or alleviate the effects of the COVID-19 emergency, such as ensuring appropriate measures. It's unclear to me what those might be, so if the board could speak to that. And also, I'm wondering about if all members are wearing appropriate personal protective equipment in any interactions with the public. What might be the need or the requirement to look up the information of testing status or results? Or is it the case that every member while on duty is not wearing PPE? So that needs to be clarified, I believe, in the report. So now, on to accountability. I think much has been made to the Civil Liberties Union around the way this information was, I guess, unilaterally decided by the government to share with police services. There is some lines here regarding, quote, the report will include information concerning how compliance with these measures is being monitored and the results of any compliance monitoring, as well as the creation of accountability and reporting requirements to prevent and address possible misuse of the data, including data breaches. There is nothing I found around what the Toronto Police Force's, accountability infrastructure would be with regards to the COVID-19 personal data regarding testing. So just finally, it says here, within 60 days of the order ceasing to have effect, total number of requests for COVID-19 status information handled by the Services, Communication, and Dispatch Services over the duration of the order by division, the total number of requests in which a COVID-19 positive result was identified, and the information was transmitted to the requesting member during the duration of the order by division, and the steps taken by the service to ensure access to the information collected is not available to members of the service other than as required by law or to facilitate access that is required by law, and that the information will be destroyed as soon as permitted by law. So I'm wondering if there would be any records kept with this new direction around race-based collection of data, if the calls made to this portal will give the public any opportunity to review the racial background of information drawn regarding health testing and results around COVID-19. So I guess just to reiterate, I know I will not get a chance to speak again regarding what are some of the nature of the instances with which this data would be pulled. Is it only that the data will be central to communication and dispatch services? Who are the authorized users identified by police services? And regarding accountability, what is the kind of accountability infrastructure that the Toronto Police Force is going to implement, as well as will we understand or have an understanding of what the racial background of the members of the public for whom this data has been accessed? Thank you. I concede the rest of the time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teckle. Any questions of the deputant? Hearing none, I'll move over now to Ms. Chandra Casera, who I believe wanted to hold this item and has some questions, and hopefully some of the answers to the deputant's questions will come out in that. Ms. Chandra Casera?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Teschner and the board office team for this very detailed report. I'm supportive of this policy and supportive of access to this type of health information when the information can be used to effectively manage occupational health and safety, as well as public safety. And I feel the same way about sharing mental health related information with the police, because we know that when a police officer has accurate information prior to arriving at the scene, that information can be used for officer safety, public safety, and to effectively support the community member in need. My concerns are about disclosure of this type of highly sensitive healthcare information. So I'm assuming that because this portal is supported by the Solicitor General, that it's fully compliant with the Police Records Check Reform Act, which prohibits the disclosure of health information to third parties. And so I have kind of a practical question. So my understanding is the dispatcher is granted access to the portal to obtain the health information. And how does the dispatcher then communicate the health information to the responding officer? Is it a direct call to the officer in the car, or is it broadcasted over the radio for all officers to hear it across the entire division?
Chief, I'll pass that question over to you or to anyone in command that you wish to answer that question. And perhaps in answering it, you can maybe touch on a couple of the issues the deputant raised, if that's possible. Thank you, Chief.
Well, thank you, Chair. And I just want to be very clear. I understand that this policy has been written, and it clearly states that it has not been turned on yet. So the Toronto Police Service has not turned it on to this date. Some of the questions that are spoken to definitely speak to the actual all chiefs that were sent out to us. And it speaks very clearly to the importance of privacy issues, privacy concerns. There's some things that I can't speak to right now because there are some questions that I have asked in a confidential setting. But I can tell you that once the answers are provided to me through the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, I would definitely like that opportunity to speak in a public setting as to some of the decisions. But as now, Chair, I have not turned it on. And I do understand the sensitivities and some of the issues and concerns that are brought up. And I also see the some of the elements of the fact that we're having our police officers breaking that physical distancing guideline each and every single day. So the safety of the men and women that are out there, not just on the front line, but also my court officers and a couple of other people, there are some concerns. But in order to get this right, I want to make sure that all of the questions that have been provided, that I have provided, I have clear and comprehensive understanding of what the answers are before I turn anything on.
Thank you, Chief. Sarah, any further questions?
That's great. Thank you. And I look forward to hearing more information on that once you have your answers from the OACP. Thank you, Chief.
Members of the board, any questions of the Chief? Hearing none, does anybody wish to speak to this item? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
Francis Nunziata.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. Can I have a seconder?
Marie
Muller. Second.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I heard you first. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. Moving forward to item number 5, we have a deputation. Mr. Teschner, you're on. That's the Toronto Police Service Board Race-Based Data Collection Analysis and Public Reporting Policy Quarterly Progress Update on Implementation. Mr. Teschner?
Okay, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, hear you clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I just wanted to, I guess, dig in a bit into this item regarding the write-up that's presented in the agenda, which I think this race-based data collection analysis public reporting policy is, quote, to build trust between police and communities. And I'm wondering about these focus groups or consultations. And I use that word loosely in light of the kinds of, I guess, focus groups and consultations that were done with regard to the installation of closed circuit cameras. I found those to be quite ineffective and not substantive at all. And just to note, they moved forward with those. So in the case with this initiative around race-based data collection and the policy framework and infrastructure that's being conceived, I think it's important to note that these are being done in absence of any focus groups or consultation sessions with Indigenous communities. And if the focus groups are designed to inform curriculum, which would inform the training, it seems to me that would be a significant oversight, especially, and then I wonder what the organizational case is to do these things separately, to do, I guess, normal or regular mainstream line focus groups or consultations, and then do separate ones with Indigenous communities, which as the agenda states has not been to date have been conducted. So I wonder, there's many cases to be made. One, of course, is resources and organizational base. So will the training and curriculum be conducted right now, be moved forward, and then consultations with Indigenous communities, and then a separate, I guess, policy initiative or race-based data framework? And I think I wanted to shed a light on to make an accounting of the consultations, because I wonder how many were conducted, in which parts of the city, how many people attended. I think these are important questions for us to be able to hold up to public scrutiny if we're able to call them, I think, ethically consultation. So to what is, I guess, identified in the report of the agenda, it paints a picture of consultations that were conducted with absolutely no community dissent or resistance to this initiative, or hesitations or even concern. I find that personally, as a researcher and as a person who works in communities, hard to believe. It says, and I wrote, and I quote, sorry, despite doubts and concerns, community is optimistic in the positive impact of the RBDC strategy. So I wonder if the board could speak to what some of the doubts and concerns were, outlined in detail. Could you elaborate on these? Could you perhaps point us to where the public record or public accounting of these consultations are? And I'm interested in it states that there will be a public awareness campaign the police force plans to take on to, quote, communicate clearly and consistently the purpose of the strategy. I'm wondering if that could be elaborated on, maybe by the chief, as well as it says here that the race-based data analyses are only as good as the weakest data point. So the training creates the opportunity to address challenges in the quality of records at the point of collection. I'm wondering if that could be elaborated on as well. What are some of the concerns regarding quality of records at the point of collection, as well as the, quote, common data entry errors within the two systems used to record use of force and level 3 interactions, end quote. So I'm wondering if you could include that, as well as what are some of the details of how the results of this data collection will be made public? Because I'm sure you would agree that any rigorous data collection is only as useful as it is when it is held up to public scrutiny. So just to reiterate some of the questions, what were some of the doubts or concerns or hesitations that the report points to but does not elaborate on? What is this specific kinds of public awareness campaigns? And I think most importantly, what are some of the challenges in the quality of records at the point of collection? And what are some of the concerns regarding accountability? How will this data be made public? Can we expect quarterly reports? What can the public expect as we move forward with this, or it sounds as the board or the police force moves forward with this? Thank you. Concede the rest of the time.
Thank you, Mr. Teschner. Any questions of the deputant? Hearing none. Ms. Chandra-Kassara, I believe you had some questions of the service on this one. I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. My question is raised by the deputant as well, and it has to do with page 4, the community consultations and focus groups. Just wondering, given the restrictions of COVID-19, have virtual consultations been considered through phone or WebEx like this?
Deputy McLean.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes.
Thanks, Deputy.
Yes.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Deputy.
Thank you. Good morning. Thanks for your question. Absolutely. In terms of looking at electronic consultations, we are absolutely doing that. This report was written in March, just as we were adjusting to the challenges of the pandemic. So as an organization, we have been watching and learning what this pandemic has meant for us. And so recognizing that many organizations, the service, like many organizations, as well as many community members, are resorting to this type of connections during this time of social distancing. So we are absolutely considering it as another means of reaching the public. We are also asking the public how they would like us to connect with them as well. But I will advise that we have been given the advice not to use this type of means of community consultation with the Indigenous community, which requires its own strategy. We have been very upfront about that, reporting that I believe in December, that we are working on a separate Indigenous communities consultation and consulting with key stakeholders who can advise us on how best to do that. But we are always looking for new ways to connect with members of the.
Thank you, Deputy. Ms. Chandra-Kassara, any further questions?
No, thank you. I really appreciate that, Deputy, and I'm glad to hear that this work is going to move forward despite the pandemic. Thank you.
Board members, any questions? Hearing none, does anybody wish to speak on this item? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve, please?
Upala Chandrasekhar, I'll move.
Thank you, Ms. Chandra-Kassara. Can I have a seconder?
Marie Mulliner will second.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. Moving forward to item number 6, which is the award of construction management services for the new 41 Division project. Councillor Ford has held that item down. Over to you, Councillor Ford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief with my question. So in just reading the report, just the cost value of this kind of caught me off guard, although I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form into construction. So I was just wondering if someone could just give a breakdown of this contract. I know there is a list of stuff that this construction company will be doing, but it's quite high level. So I just wanted to have someone dive into this a bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Councillor Ford. It's Tony Veneziano, the Chief Administrative Officer, and I'd be happy to provide more information with respect to the questions that you have. There's basically two ways you can build or do a facility. One is through a general contractor, which is a very closed process. Once you get the pricing in, you don't see a lot of the costs that are included in that cost. We've actually used the construction management approach for larger projects very successfully over the years. And so when you look at this, and it is a high number, I agree with you, Councillor Ford, we're looking at $6.4 million. That's over a 3-year period in terms of the construction that we have to do. And what that gives us is a representative, in this case Eastern, as a construction manager, who has our best interests in making sure that the project is constructed to our requirements, that there's value engineering, and that we can actually reduce costs where it makes sense. So that part of their cost, which is about $810,000 over the 3-year period, that's strictly as they become the constructor, they take on the liability and the risks, and they provide and have our best interest in terms of the work that they do. In doing that work, you have to put obviously trailers and other equipment on site, and again, you're paying for those trailers. So like just the trailer alone over a 3-year period is probably about $1 million. And then you've got other costs that are also included in terms of staffing the site and making sure that we do the proper site surveys, work with the city in terms of permits, work with our architectural consultant. All of this leads to and has resulted in the cost that you see before you. One thing that gives us assurance around the reasonableness of the cost is that we did go through a competitive process. There were other bidders, and the cost, certainly in terms of the second bidder, was very comparable to what Eastern is charged as basically included in their price. The other thing I'll say is that what makes this one a little bit more unique in terms of the construction is that we're actually building on the current site and keeping our operations going at the same time. So that makes it a lot more complex, a lot more sequencing becomes very important because you're doing the construction in phases. And so it just makes everything a little bit more complicated, which usually leads to more cost. The other thing I will say is that all of the costs that you see, we will get detailed invoices for, whereas with a general contractor, you just get a bill at various stages of the process. They will do sub-tendering for drywall, for excavation, for a number of other things that we need. We will actually see those prices as part of that process. And so there's a lot more transparency in terms of the work that's done. And again, their job is to make sure that we get what we want at the lowest possible price. So I hope that helps.
Councillor Ford, any further questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, no, Tony answered all of them. So that was good. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor. Any other members have questions? Hearing none. Anybody wish to speak to this item? Hearing no one, can I have a motion to approve, please?
Marie Mulliner moves approval.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Did I hear somebody else?
Michael Ford will second.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. Moving on to item number 8, which is the special constable appointments and reappointments, May 2020. We have a deputant on this item. Derek, you're up.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Thank you, Derek. Go ahead when you're ready.
Just checking. So in this report, it says special constables play an integral role in keeping our community safe and now have the added responsibility of assisting the city with educating the public on the restrictions enacted under the Emergency Management and Civilian Protection Act and related municipal bylaws. Like any special constable is going to educate me on what the law is. Okay, so, well, here's some of the basics I'd expect these new special constables then to be educating the public regarding the law on. So number 3, I have here, take notice the Supreme Court of Canada in the case below said that the Statute Law Revision Act 1893 repealed some obsolete provisions of the British North America Act 1867. That's from the resolution to amend the Constitution 1981. Take notice this footnote from the Government of Canada's Justice Laws website concerning the enacting clause of the British North America Act being repealed by the Statute Law Revision Act 1893. Take notice what the Supreme Court of Canada had to say in this case below in regards to the government's sole claim Government's sole claim to exercise lawful authority. This is from the reference regarding the secession of Quebec 1998. The Constitution binds all governments, both federal and provincial, including the executive branch. They may not transgress its provisions. Indeed, their sole claim to exercise lawful authority rests in the powers allocated to them under the Constitution and can come from no other source. Now, there's a wrinkle with this. Take notice the proclamation of the Constitution Act 1982, signed by Elizabeth R., said that the Constitution shall come into force subject to Section 59. And whereas Section 58 of the Constitution Act 1982, set out in Schedule B to the Canada Act, provides that the Constitution Act 1982 shall, subject to Section 59 thereof, come into force on a day to be fixed by proclamation issued under the Great Seal of Canada. Now know you that we, by and with the advice our Privy Council for Canada, do this by our proclamation declare that the Constitution Act 1982 shall, subject to Section 59 thereof, come into force on the 17th day of April in the year of our Lord 1982. All of which are loving subjects, you guys who work for government would be the loving subjects, and all other whom these presents may concern, I hereby required to take notice and to govern themselves accordingly. Take notice, Psalms 98:9 in the King James Bible 16:11 says that the people shall be judged with equity before the Lord, for he cometh to judge the earth. With righteousness shall he judge the world and the people with equity. Take notice that in this email below, head clerk at the City of Toronto, Yulie Watkis, implies to me this definition. The definition the City of Toronto uses for bylaw is the usual definition. When I was asking her about Mayor Tory's fancy new bylaws, she told me, she gives me a link and says, is where you will find copies of the order and the link to the bylaw, which has its usual definition. Take notice what the Supreme Court of Canada has to say in the case below in regards to definitions being required for certainty in the law. This is from Peel Regional Municipality versus Canada, Peel Regional Municipality versus Ontario, 1992. Such definition is required to preserve a measure of certainty in the law, as well as to ensure due consideration of factors such as the legitimate expectation of the parties. Take notice what the Supreme Court of Canada has to say in the case below in regards to enactments being void for vagueness. Committee for the Commonwealth of Canada versus Canada, 1991. It is a basic principle of due process that an enactment is void for vagueness if its prohibitions are not clearly defined. Take notice what the definition for define is from the Dictionary of Canadian Law, 4th edition. Define, to explain the meaning, to limit, to clarify. Take notice what the Toronto Police Services Board's definition for bylaw. Bylaw means this bylaw as amended from time to time, not exactly a real definition. Take notice, head city clerk again, Yulie Watkis in this email below, implies that I can look up the definition for bylaw in a dictionary of my own choosing. She says to me, the definition of bylaw can be looked up in a dictionary. Take notice this explanation below regarding the applicability of a bylaw as explained by Toronto Police Services Chief Mark Saunders from the agenda of the Toronto Police Services Board meeting on May 2019. Applicability, the provisions of this bylaw shall apply to all members and employees of the service and the board. And that's my time.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions of the deputant? Hearing none. Thank you, Derek. Can I have a motion to approve this item?
Marie Molliner moves.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Can I have a seconder?
Francis Nunziata.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is approved. Next item, item number 9, Ryerson University Special Constable Program. I think we have 3 deputants on this item, and the first one is Mr. Teckle.
Hi, everybody, can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Thank you. Go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, according to the agenda, it says here that Ryerson has submitted a business case and a request to enter into an agreement with the board. And the business case outlined extensive research conducted by a third party as a result of concerning student and staff perception safety on campus and how a special constable program would play a role in increasing campus safety. It should be noted in an article in the Eye Opener in November of 2019 that there were various groups on campus that were not consulted, Racialized Students Collective, Black Liberation Collective at Ryerson, regarding the, I guess, state of the relationship between not only campus security, but also police generally with members of the Ryerson community. So my question, and as I had read in the agenda, as far as I understood, I think a representative from Ryerson was supposed to be on this, in this meeting, this virtual meeting. So wanted to get some, I guess, insight into where this report lie, what's the nature of this extensive research, whom were consulted. That would be, I think, something for which the public institution would need to put up for public scrutiny. I had some questions around, I guess, accountability for these special constables. Would they be, I guess, mandated to also collect some of this data that the general members of the Toronto Police Force will be collecting? Will that information also be made public to us? And I also, I think, have some concerns regarding the lack of consultation, at least substantive consultation, with racialized students on campus, Indigenous students on campus. And the item number 5 in this, point 5 in this item, I guess, equity, community, and inclusion. Ryerson University is making efforts to recruit members of minority communities to be appointed as special constables. It is difficult to attract suitable candidates when there's no timeline to when the positions may become available. I think what's informing that, I guess, proposal is quite a thin, I guess, notion of diversity or inclusion, if these things are to mean anything anymore. To not consult actual members of the community to whom this would affect, but then ask in a rather, I would say, tokenized fashion to don the uniform or to join the program without having been consulted, to me, shows a deeply flawed and inherently, I would even say, a structurally racist conception of how to conduct or comport to public institutions. What do we think diversity and inclusion is to mean if we're not being consulted to stay at the proverbial table? Just to end with the conclusion in this item says that the special constables employed by Ryerson would assist the TPS with their commitment to work with our communities. The special constables would also expand the reach of the TPS to be where the community needs us the most. I think this also belies the number of string of reports that indicate how some of these, how frayed the relationships between the police force and many communities have been, which I guess initiated or sparked the earlier item around collecting race-based data. So if those things could be addressed, or if they could be moved to a later meeting when we're able to maybe physically meet, or when the representative from Ryerson is able to meet on record, these would be, I think, important questions to have answered. Again, what was the nature of the extensive research? Will they be made public? What of the groups that were not consulted? And so forth. So that would be something, if somebody could speak to something, some of these would be great, as well as the accountability, I guess, of these special constables. So thanks. Continue the rest of the time.
Thank you, Mr. Teschner. Any questions of the deputant?
It's Marie Mulliner.
Oh, sorry.
I have
Marie?
I have a question for the, I think if Deputy Chief Raymer is available, that might answer some of the questions that the deputant has asked.
Marie, can we hold those down until after the deputants, and then we can ask the service questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll note that you've got questions of the service. The next deputant, I believe, is Josh Lammers. Is he here?
Yeah, can you folks hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
very clearly. Thank you.
Okay, hi. So I want to begin with saying that I have a feeling it does not matter what I say here to institutions like Ryerson University and the Toronto Police Services. I have a feeling that it does not matter that for 5 years on that campus as a Black undergraduate and graduate student organizer and activist and now alumni, what words I have to say will be relegated to administrators from both sides, chuckling on the sidelines once the cameras go down. I mean, I guess you folks aren't on camera. So I speak knowing that the impending mockery that has little to do with me and that as that's not my anti-Blackness to deal with, but know that I speak as a signal for you folks of the impending organizing that will be done to once again shut down the ways in which Ryerson University and Toronto Police Services love to get in bed with one another. I also speak from a space of profound but not surprised disappointment at Ryerson University, a campus that touts social justice and has hosted several events with Black organizers, activists, scholars, students, and community members in rigorous discussions on dismantling a policing state in its extremities. President Lashemi and Vice President Denise O'Neill Green are quite familiar with smiling in front of Black crowds applauding us for our work, and yet here we are. So therefore, I speak for and to that Black audience who's listening now, whose hope and dreams are that our lives globally and in Canada, in this city, and in spaces like Ryerson University are free from carceral conditions that include policing and policing practices and devices. I say all this to provide you folks with an opportunity, which is to say no to the partnership. However, unlikely it is you won't follow this direction. But if I were you, would this partnership not strike you as odd when back in 2018, Black students organized to have your partnership ended with respect to your supposed bias avoidance and diversity training happening on our campus? Were we not clear when we said we do not wish to have you so intimate to our already precarious Black lives? Did you forget when we reminded you we do not trust police or campus security for that matter based on the close relationship you all have with the carceral apparatus that destroys us? When campus security personnel call immigration to deport Black folks like Wendy Maxwell, why should we trust you? When security personnel reflect the mentality of Toronto Police, traveling in packs and harassing and carting Black students and people, why should we trust you? When in January 2017, Toronto Police on Ryerson campus threatened to arrest a man for videotaping a violent arrest of a Black man already restrained. In this instance, they tasered him while he was already on the ground, and the video showed the police officer still yelling at the unconscious Black man to not move while, quote-unquote, applying pressure with his foot. And to the man filming, the police officer warned that the Black man will give him AIDS if he spits on him. So why should we trust you? When Toronto Police Services outside of our campus is such a threat to our lives and livelihood, why should we trust you? When Toronto Police Services is under review currently from the Privacy Commissioner for uses of facial recognition technology, why should we trust you? Who is going to be responsible for when people who are research participants, who often do not look like they belong to the eye of those apparently keeping the campus safe, are pushed off campus as they come to meetings with researchers and research groups? People who many times come from places like Covenant House and other shelters, and who are often young, Black, and racialized, queer, and trans, who may be disabled and experiencing mental health issues, and who are doing our faculty and students a favor by being involved in our research, and then they are confronted with police. We know that batons can still break our flesh and bones. We know handcuffs can still bruise our wrists. We know that one moment of who are you, a question now justified through ideas of private property, lead to deep dives into our personal lives into depths we are never allowed to know. We know these dives result in our deportation, detainment, unjustified arrest, humiliation, and documentation of those we may or may not know. We already know that these campuses do not see Black people as legitimate on these spaces, with graduate students and faculty often policed by security when we try to access our offices. The presence of Black people in administration do not signal to us anything will get better, just like Black people as constables do not provide safety. Just last year, Ryerson University conducted an extensive anti-Black racism climate review that was completed almost a year ago, yet we, the students, staff, faculty, and public, have not seen the results. I wonder why. You are not welcomed on our campus. You can listen to this and understand that we, the ones the institution will not listen to or let the public hear, do not consent. Or we can do this the old-fashioned way and the only way we know how, which is to defend our Black lives and remind both Ryerson and Toronto Police Services just exactly whose campus this is. I have no questions because you folks don't seem to answer them.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of the deputant? Hearing none. Mr. Lammers, thank you very much for your deputation. Our next deputant is Jeremy Bland. Jeremy, are you on the line?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly. Thank you. Go ahead when you're ready.
So I am here speaking on behalf of Ryerson's Canadian Students for Sensible Drug Policy. Full disclosure, we are adamantly opposed to increased police presence and actually any police presence at Ryerson campus. I think it's really important to just acknowledge and echo at all of the sentiments that have been previously said before me. But I also just wanted to speak as well to say that, you know, at the beginning of this meeting, I believe it was said something along the lines of that we're all so thankful for the work that Toronto Police Services are doing to keep all of our communities safe and feel protected. And I just think it's really important to fundamentally reject that really kind of tone-deaf statement, which completely ignores and erases everything that Josh just said before me about the fact that the truth is that there are many, many, many communities at Ryerson and in Toronto who do not feel protected by police. They don't feel safe by police. And it's not a neutral sense. They feel unsafe with their presence there. This includes people who are racialized, people who are trans, queer, people with disabilities, people who are drug users, people experiencing homelessness. And, you know, given the geography of Ryerson campus, which is in the epicenter of an overdose crisis, which is in the epicenter of Toronto's homelessness crisis, which, by the way, shame on you, Mayor Tory, for allowing more and more people to die. The reality is that I don't understand how you can tote around that adding constables is increasing safety when actually, and by the way, this is all included in the file that's been attached in my deputation, but actually all the research that's been done in secondary institutions, so in high schools, to show that police presence actually does not do anything to increase safety of students. And there's an abundance of research to show that in post-secondary institutions, it harms marginalized folk. It harms racialized folk. It harms queer and trans folk, drug users, all the people that I listed. We know that, you know, with the Works, the safe injection site, one of the largest safe injection sites in Canada and the largest one in Ontario, which is right next to campus on Victoria Street, we know that people don't go in to use those services when Toronto police and other security officers in uniform are standing by, ready to arrest people for drug dealing charges. And, you know, it's sort of a joke because there's been this change in policy to say, okay, we're okay with people using drugs now. They have a safe space to use drugs. That's fine. We're not okay with people dealing drugs, except I don't understand where you think they're getting their drugs from. I mean, if people are okay to use their drugs, they can't just snap their fingers and have them. They need to get it from somewhere. And so, of course, people are dealing drugs in the epicenter of an overdose crisis, which happens to be on our campus. And so when you have people not using these services where there has never, ever been a recorded fatal overdose, instead, because of the intimidation of your officers, they're going into alleyways, they're going into bathrooms, they're going into private spaces without supervision, without safe needles to use, without supervision at all, and people are dying. And so how dare you all claim to be keeping us safer? I mean, I think you really need to do some reflection on who are you talking about. Are you talking about all of the community members of Ryerson? Because our community is not just white students. It is not just straight, cis, white students. Homeless people are parts of the Ryerson community. Racialized students, staff, community members are parts of our community. Like, they are part of the community, and it's your job to protect them as well. And I think the unfortunate realization that you guys can't seem to come to is that actually you can do a better job of protecting these folk by just not being there. You know, we don't need police. We need social workers. So I think, you know, I just wanted to speak to that, to say that literally people are dying because of already security presence on campus. People are not using the Works safe injection site. You know, and that's just one example. I think there's been other really great examples already said before me that also should be equally paid attention to. But again, I just kind of want to echo my point that actually, if you really do wish to keep our community safe and to protect us as you claim to, then stay off of our campus. And instead, Mayor Tory, redirect the funds from these police services into services for social work, for housing, for drug policy, for a safe supply, and for other things.
Thank you, Mr. Bland. Your time's up. Thank you for your deputation. Do you have any questions of the deputant? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Bland. Vice Chair Molnar, I believe you had questions of the service.
Yes, thank you very much. And I very much appreciate the deputant's concerns, and I think the experience that the service has had with other special constable programs might provide an additional piece of information. I know it's very difficult in the absence of having had tried the special constable program for the deputants to be reassured, but I know we have had considerable experience with at least one other institution, the University of Toronto. And I'm wondering if a member from the Toronto Police Service might speak to that. I think the documentation, the report provides good information, so we don't need to repeat any content of the report that's before us. But if the members of the service could speak to the experience we've had perhaps with the University of Toronto program and how in particular complaints, I'm assuming there's a complaints program, how complaints are, a complaints process, how complaints are handled. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may start.
Let's go ahead, Chief. Thank you.
Thanks. Before I turn it over to Deputy Raymer, first I want to thank both deputants for the comments that have been made. Pre-special constable request, the Toronto Police Service has actively been involved with the Ryerson community for numerous years, and we understand that it is an incredibly vibrant, diverse community. Our relationship has been very strong with many of those within the Ryerson Institute. And we've had some very strong and very successful partnerships. But speaking to this directly on the special constable request, I'll turn the floor over to Deputy Raymer.
Good morning, Chair and members of the board. With respect to the type of training our special constables or the special constables program would undertake, there's training with respect to which emphasizes de-escalation as an alternative to the use of force, procedural fairness, to educate and assist identifying unconscious bias and racial profiling, educate how to communicate effectively, particularly around issues under dispute, investigative outcomes and complaints, how to respond to people affected by mental health, mental illness, or emotional distress. This is all in addition to the training they would receive around these federal and provincial statutes, the criminal code, and bylaw enforcement in that area. They receive this particular type of training. It'll be conducted by a third-party company. However, the Toronto Police College oversees the curriculum. In addition to that, we oversee all complaints that are made against special constables. The more serious ones will be investigated by our office, and ones of a less serious nature would be returned to their unit complaint coordinator, much like we do here in the service as well. Is that helpful?
Thank you, Deputy.
And Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Raymer. My question is about, and this may be outside of our immediate control, because I was asking about the complaints process. So if there's any way you could speak to that, or perhaps at a later date report back on how complaints are monitored by the police service in relation to the special constables program. Thank you.
Deputy, can you add anything to that?
Receives our complaint process directly, and I'll just have her jump in here and provide you some update on that.
Hello, it's Staff Sergeant Hannah Bart, and I work in the Special Constable Liaison Unit. And for all of the Special Constable agencies, we receive an initial report from the agency that receives the Special Constable complaint. That initial complaint package includes the identification of the Special Constables who were involved in the incident being identified, as well as a brief summary of what the allegation is. It goes to the investigative body, who then categorizes that complaint as either serious or less serious. The more serious ones will be kept by our Professional Standards Unit for investigation. The less serious ones, usually not involving use of force, will go back to the agency. And the agencies under the agreement are required to have their own investigative body that is trained by the Toronto Police Service on the investigative process. And then they create a document at the end listing their findings and whether the allegations have been substantiated or unsubstantiated. If they're substantiated, what they recommend or will issue as a resolution. And that is returned to the Toronto Police Service for evaluation to ensure that it was a complete investigation and whether they agree with what the outcome is.
Thank you. Vice Chair Molinar, any further questions?
No, thank you. That was a very helpful response. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Chair?
Board members, any further questions?
Hi, Chair Hart. This is Board Member Ainsworth Morgan.
Yes.
I just had, first of all, I want to just acknowledge all deputants, but specifically the last few that spoke on this issue around with Ryerson. I guess I'm sort of wondering if there's an opportunity to really sort of hear the position of Ryerson and have some of these pieces sort of addressed. Obviously, that's not our purview in terms of their requests, but I would like to be able to have a better understanding of the process around that in terms of their consultation or need and so forth. And so to sort of address some of the questions that the deputants did bring forward. So if there's an opportunity for that to happen, obviously given some of the challenges with COVID, but I think it would be something that's, I think, important to sort of validate some of these concerns being brought forward. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. We'll certainly look into that. Any further questions from board members? Hearing none, anybody wish to speak to this item? No?
Chair?
No. Yes.
Yeah, it's the chief. I just, I don't have in front of me the steps taken for the consultation piece, but I can tell you with anything that new, especially things that involve uniform, one of the things that is absolutely necessary is the transparency and accountability piece. And it works two ways. Number one, from us ensuring that the special constables will be applying rule of law lawfully and with dignity and respect, but the other piece too, which speaks to community awareness. So we will definitely take the opportunities to be involved in the education and awareness piece to address some of the concerns that have been issued by the deputants with respect to how complaints can be laid and reassure what guarantees are available to for the customer satisfaction, understanding that transparency and accountability play a vital role if these programs are going to be successful.
Thank you, Chief. That's very helpful. Board members, can I have a motion to approve?
Marie Molinar moves.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Seconder?
Francis Nunziata.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. Now we're going to move forward to item number 18, which is the annual report 2019 uniform promotions. And we have one deputant on that item, Kingsley Gilliam. Kingsley, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Terrific. Start whenever you're ready. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, well, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board and the chief. I'm looking at the chief's report. And now, first and foremost, I don't know if you had a chance to see my submission. Have any of you seen it?
Mr. Teschner, has that been circulated to all board members?
I don't know if I sent it via email to the administrator, and ironically, the first submission had a wrong document, and so I sent it late last night, so I don't know if you have had a chance to see that. So
I don't believe we've seen.
Right. So I would refer you to that to track that down and view that. My comments have to do with the chief's report, and the background section notes that on May 29, 2003, the board approved giving a standing authority to the chair and deputy chair and their designates to approve uniform promotions. What is not clear is whether there was a policy setting out how recruitments and promotions and so on are done, or whether there's any targets or so on in the organization for them to follow. However, looking further at the report, and I looked at the chart that deals with eligibility to apply for promotions and the process that they go through to be approved, suggests that there is a real discrepancy, because for instance, with respect to blacks, it shows where there are 213 blacks that were eligible to apply for promotions. Now, I do not know what the complement of the Toronto Police Service is at this time, but given the demographics in the Toronto area, I would suspect that we should have sufficient officers on board, that there would be a lot more than 213 qualified to apply for promotions. This brings me back to a period in the history of your predecessor organization, the Metropolitan Toronto Police, where we had a limited number of black officers, and they served their entire careers without any promotions. And so we have seen where this situation continued for quite some time. Now, when Black Action Defense Committee was created when the Black Action Defense Committee was created in 1998, we were addressing policing issues. It was about the police brutality and shooting, but then we also did some focus on the internal issues in terms of the treatment of the black officers on board and their lack of promotions and so on. And that, in conjunction with the employment equity provisions of the Police Services Act, RSO 1990, which required employment equity policies and practices in policing.
Mr. Gilliam,
and with some special measures from the police service, from the Ministry of Community and from the Solicitor General's Department, that set up a recruitment unit and trained people to be police officers and made them available police services for hire. So we are seeing some progress.
Mr. Gilliam, your time is up. You're about 30 seconds over time. So thank you very much for your deputation. Really
could
appreciate
I just do my concluding? Just indulge me for 30 seconds.
If you could do it in 10 seconds, Mr. Gilliam.
Yeah, so what I'm suggesting, sir, we've seen a decline in the number of Black officers being promoted. We have lost a number through retirement. And if without a structured plan of action to recruit, train, and promote consistent with our availability in the Census Metropolitan data, the Toronto Police Service will never be able to have sufficient officers to reflect the community they serve.
Okay,
and
thank you,
so
Mr.
I
Gilliam.
implore you to go back to the principles, and you got to do a census of your service.
We got your point, Mr. Gilliam. I have to wrap you up now. Mr. Teschner is going to comment on your written deputation. Mr. Teschner, can you comment on that, please?
Yes, hi, Mr. Gilliam. Thank you. It looks like we did not receive your written deputation in time to circulate it to board members, and it may have been sent inadvertently to the wrong email address. But what we will undertake to do is make sure that we've got your most recent deputation and circulate it to board members with respect to this item, and make sure that it's part of the record with respect to this item for this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Teschner. Do we have any questions of the deputant? Hearing none, can I have a motion to receive this item?
Marie Molliner moves.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Do I have a seconder?
Ainsworth Morgan, second.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. Moving forward to item number 24, which is the annual report 2020 filing of the Toronto Police Services procedures. Ms. Molliner, I believe you wanted to hold that down, and I think you may even have a motion. Ms. Molliner?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have a motion, and it's in the context of the Nova Scotia shooting. And so I would ask that the chief report back to us. And the motion right now is that the chief report to the board in July of 2020 with respect to the services assessment of the critical issues that have been highlighted in the context of the Nova Scotia mass shooting, including whether there are any identified gaps, concerns, or vulnerabilities from the services perspective, and how the procedures filed, hence it's, why it's attached to this particular item, and how the procedures filed address such a situation, and that such a report specifically include, but not be limited to, a discussion of potential access by members of the public to police equipment, assets, or uniforms that are still in use or are no longer in use and have been discarded in some way by the service, the use of public alerts and other communication tools by the service during an incident likely to be of significant public interest, and procedures which touch on these issues and any other matters that the service has identified in its analysis of this incident. So my motion at this point asks that we report back to the board in July. I understand that that might be a bit soon for the chief, so I would ask before we pass this motion or discuss this motion, if the chief could speak to the motion in terms of the complexity of the work that may be required to respond, and when since we will not be meeting in August, this would put it over until September, so when a report could be due. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Molliner. Do you have a seconder of that motion?
Chair.
Was that seconded by Ms. Chandra-Sarah, the motion
Chair.
itself?
Chair?
Yes, absolutely.
So with respect to this, my request is, again, that the standard that I ask is at least 3 months. The timelines for 2-month turnarounds are incredibly aggressive, since in fact that we would have to have the report in its draft form by June 8th. That's just over 2 weeks from today, so that we can preview, make amendments, changes, alterations to submit for the 15th. So in this particular case, I would be doing a detailed inventory on all systems and distribution, all systems in collection of equipment, staffing over the summer, also with the people that would be involved is an issue, as well as combing the multitudes of procedures and rules that have touch points to distribution and collection. On top of that, we're going through a pandemic. So the standard that I always ask for is 90 days, and this one is going to take some time.
Chief, are you okay with September board meeting?
Yes, I am.
Ms. Molinar, are you okay to amend your motion to September?
Yes, and I do appreciate the complexity of this, and my motion is being made today in the context of the recent event. So I will then amend my motion and request that the chief report back to the board in September of 2020 with respect to all the items that I previously read out in the motion for item 24.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of board members of this motion of the mover? Hearing none. Do we have any questions of board members on the report itself? Would anybody wish to speak to the report? So we have the report itself, and we have a motion by the vice chair, which is seconded by Ms. Chandra Casera. All in favor of the report and the motion? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that report is received and the motion is carried. That item is carried. Thank you. Item number 27, which is the annual report 2019, use of CEW weapons. I believe we have a deputant, Miguel. Is Miguel here?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Go ahead when you're ready, Miguel. Yes, hear you loud and clear. Go right ahead.
Dear board members, and good morning. COVID-19 has had many victims. We lost relatives. We lost friends. I dedicate my deputation for my friend that I lost, Derek. Soberall. First, I'm combining my two deputations, item number 7 and number 28 for the record, for the sake of time. This is Miguel Avila from Region Park on the phone. I have disabilities, and one is mental illness. I am using this technology to speak on this item of great importance for the community. Taser sometimes kills people, although your report points out that no one has died in 2019, according to page 25 in the report. As you know, Mr. Hart, Mr. Mayor, and City Councilors of City Hall, we always rely heavily on our civil servants and expensive consultants to give us their opinion, professionals. And I know that we listen to the experts, so let the experts help to make improvements, Mr. Mayor. You always say that at City Council. We need an enhanced mobile crisis intervention team. We need funds to hire nurses with experience with people in crisis. That is my first recommendation to the board. I have spoken in previous years when Mr. Alok Mukherjee was the chair of the board. It is because of those deputations from the public and myself included, we have spoken the use of CEWs and other de-escalation techniques that in the incorporation of the mobile crisis units and advisory groups. I guess next quarterly report, Mr. Sandy will have to bring to the board what occurred last March 19, 2020. Mr. Soberall was a true social warrior since 2020. He was a good friend of mine. He had many friends and lives were touched because of his uniqueness. He left behind a wife and kids. He died on the city streets on March 19, 2020, after being tasered by Toronto police officers. On April 15, 2020, of course, the SIU already cleared Toronto police in the death of my friend. Of course, you know there will be legal action coming up. As anyone in the microphone right now is speaking directly to Mr. Hart and all the members, have you ever been tasered? Because that will give you a living experience knowledge, the feeling of receiving 40,000 volts in your body. But I know we have advisory bodies, and we have people with living experiences, and perhaps some of them, they have been tasered in the past. And that's why we are activists somehow. Page 4 on the use of CEWs it seems that the demonstrated force presence seems to be the most powerful way to take control of crisis. They are serious, but you have to be compassionate when you use your CEWs. You want other alternatives for the escalation. They include impact weapons, physical control, OC spray, and firearms used as a display of lethal force. I even brought one day to the police shield, a from a movie set to show you how you can de-escalate situations using a shield. However, in a previous meeting, the police officers association, they said, no, we don't want to have them in our cars. So, as always, there's always financial implications. In the report, it doesn't say it, but look, we need to move forward in a post-COVID-19 world, that we need to save people's lives. Today's conversation should be around the mobile crisis unit and how we can make it more effective. We know that there are systemic barriers for the enhancing of the program. It's about money. So, in view of that, we need to ask the funding from the province, because this year alone, last year there were 30,000 calls for service involved people with mental crisis. And I know in the last 4 months, we have that rate increased because of the huge demands on people facing crisis due to COVID-19. So I look forward for the report to come out in 2021 when we evaluate the usefulness of the CEWs. I want to ask you, that is my hope, that at the outcome of this meeting, something can be done to improve the way we deal also with dogs. I have spoken on this matter too as well, you know it, when police officers had shot and killed animals, wildlife in the city of Toronto. I ask you, please, use the service of experts. In this case, the city of animal services. Don't taser dogs, for God's sake.
Thank you, Miguel.
I feel concerned. I feel real concerned.
Thank you, Miguel. Your time's up. Thank you very much for your deputation. I appreciate it. Any questions of the deputant? Hearing none. Ms. Chandra Castera, I believe you have questions of the service.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Chief and Deputy McLean, for this very detailed report. I really want to begin by saying how much I've appreciated working with you, Deputy McLean, and the use of force analyst Julie Tint to update this report. And I appreciate how you've incorporated all of my feedback over the past several years. So thank you for that. I also want to thank Inspector Kim O'Toole for actively engaging with the board's Mental Health and Addictions Advisory Panel to get their feedback and answer their questions on this report. I know I've heard from several members that they really appreciate being engaged in the report. There are two sections of the report that are particularly noteworthy to me: the Mental Health Act apprehension section and the use of subject 17 and under section. These two areas are where I always have concerns, and I really appreciate you providing this level of detail to the public on these very vulnerable populations. So thank you for that. I have a few comments and then a few questions, and also a question that I want to share from one of the co-chairs of the Mental Health and Addictions Advisory Panel. So firstly, my comments. I'm very pleased to see that 70% of the time the CEW is used by police officers as demonstrated force only. So this means that only 30% of the time is the CEW actually being used on a person. And out of over 400,000 calls for service, a CEW was used only 0.13% of the time. I think this is really great news and really great information to share with the public. My concern, of course, is the disproportionate impact on people with mental health and addictions issues. So on page 10, you've noted the subject's condition. So out of 557 incidents, only 177 had no apparent influence, which means that 380 incidents involved someone with a mental health crisis or someone using a substance. So 380 out of 557, that's about 68%. And so I continue to be concerned about this disproportionate impact on the mental health and addictions population in Toronto. My question to you is on page 7. Are you able to comment on the variability of CEW use by the divisions? If some divisions are in the low 20s for usage, while others are in the high 50s. And I'm wondering, is this a reflection of which divisions have moved to all frontline officers carrying CEW versus the divisions that still only have a supervisor carrying it? And also wondering whether this trend is consistent with the usage of other weapons aside from the CEW.
Thank you. Chief, can you respond?
I would ask Deputy McLean.
Good morning again. Ms. Chandrasekhar, thank you so much for your question. Just to clarify, all divisions have constables that are CEW trained. So when the rollout was approved in 2018, we had aimed for equal distribution between all divisions with the goal of having a minimum of at least 5 members on each platoon trained across the city. And the number of trained officers in each division can fluctuate. It's a fluid number in that it can be based on the people who are trained can turn over, so for transfers, changing job functions, platoon strength, things like that. The variability is much more likely to be caused by the number and the nature of the calls for service that our officers are attending. And that is why the report has evolved to provide some of that context, which you've already highlighted, the number of calls for service attended, as well the number of violent calls for service attended. And because the mental health community is a key stakeholder in this program, the number of persons in crisis calls, which we've seen continually increase since this program, since I've been overseeing this program. And even last year in 2019, we actually saw an increase of over 1,600 of those types of calls. So the variability is actually more to do with the nature and of calls that our officers are confronted with than the number and deployment across the city. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Ms. Chandrasekhar.
Yes.
Further questions?
Yes, thank you, Deputy. That's very helpful to know. I do have 2 other questions, and just want to be clear, these were posed by Ms. Jennifer Chambers, who's the Executive Director of the Empowerment Council, and she's one of the co-chairs of the Mental Health and Addictions Advisory Panel, and she asked myself and the chair to pose these questions. So I'm going to read them. I'll read them all and allow you to respond. So she says, this year's report continues to demonstrate an upward trend in reported use of CEWs in line with the broader deployment across the service. Last year's annual report demonstrated that the increase in CEWs was not accompanied by a decrease in the types of, it was not accompanied by a decrease in the use of other types of force. So given that, does this continue to be the case in this year? If so, given the fact that 87.6% of users of CEWs were not preceded by any other use of force, is CEW use representing cases that would previously have not had any use of force reported? And secondly, excuse me, are CEWs achieving their stated goal in reducing use of more extreme force, as well as in reducing injuries to both members of the public and service members? While the report noted that subject injuries as a result of CEWs are stable despite broader deployment, does this displace injuries from other causes?
Thank you. Deputy McLean, can you comment on that?
Yes, so can you repeat the first question one more time, please?
Sure. So given the upward trend of reported use of CEWs, does this continue to be the case in this year? If so, given the fact that 87.6% of users of CEWs were not preceded by any other use of force, CEWs representing cases that would previously have not had any use of force reported.
Yeah, so thank you. So there is no sequence of, I would say, use of force option. The officers really do react to what they're presented with, and ultimately, in those situations, which can be very dynamic and very changing, they are looking at whether the member of the public has the means, opportunity, and the motive to carry out the behavior that's in front of them, the assaultive behavior, where the officers have a concern for either their own safety, a safety of another member of the public, or oftentimes the safety of the person who is actually engaging in the threatening behavior. So there is no sequence. We do train to de-escalation first when it's safe and practical to do so. The increase, I'll say, in the use of force is anytime that the CEW is used, it is required to be reported. There are uses of force that do not always require a report. So, for example, if physical force is used that does not result in medical treatment, but I would like to say that at least with the use of the CEW, always reported, and I know that the board is quite versed in the review process that goes on, including Julie Tint's work as our use of force analyst. Our incident response committee looks at it. Our team, our supervisors look at the use of the CEW. So it does replace some of those incidents, we believe, and we are seeing, although these are early days, with 2019 being the benchmark year, we are seeing some of the numbers in injuries trending in positive ways. So that is why I've also included the information about the Special Investigation Unit cases, just, again, as an incident that has a legislated threshold to look at injuries to the public. Those are trending down, as well as some of the injuries to our officers in 2019 were trending down. And while I say these are early days, these are a number of markers that we are looking at. And so I hope that responds to your questions. If you have any follow-up, I'd be pleased to.
Great. Thanks so much, Deputy McLean. I know that Ms. Chambers will be in touch if she has any further questions.
Members, anyone have any questions? Members, any further questions? Anyone wish to speak to this item? Can I have a motion to receive the item?
Upala Chandrasekhar, I'll move.
Thank you. And a seconder?
Francis Nunziata.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. Members, I just ask your indulgence for a minute. I've been informed that Mr. Morgan wanted to ask a question on item number 18 and didn't hear me ask members for questions. So I would like to move that we reopen item number 18 briefly, which is the annual report 2019 uniform promotions. So I'm going to move that item be reopened. Can I have a seconder?
Marie Molliner seconds.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So the annual report 2019 uniform promotions. Mr. Morgan, you had a question on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hart. I just a point of clarification. I just noticed on that report, the data was from 2015 in terms of the eligibility list. So I was just wondering if there was any more sort of current information that with sort of that demographic breakdown, since that was about 5 years ago. So I was just wondering if there's any, I guess, current information around that. Yeah, so maybe I can start with that question.
Chief, can you or Deputy McLean respond?
I can take that. So we are reporting on the promotions to the rank of sergeant. and there were 2 persons on that list who were promoted within 2019. That list was created, you're quite right, in 2015, prior to the service entering into a hiring and a promotion moratorium. And so that's why that list spans 2015 to 2019. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sorry. So is there an updated list? Is there something that's more current, or are we just sort of based on that list alone? I'm just wondering if there's something more current that's available that can be accessed.
So when it comes to the people who participated in this promotional process in 2015, that is the information that we've had about them. And so I can tell you that some of the work that is on the plate of our Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights unit is, in fact, getting more up-to-date statistics on our demographics on our members. And so that's part of the work that will be on their work plan in the coming years. But this is the data that we had at the time for the members who participated in that 2015 promotional process.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And would it also be possible to sort of get a sense of where the breakdown is within the service, those of visible minorities? Is that possible to also be able to have a breakdown around that? And
yes, we can have a breakdown to the extent that people respond. So you will see within the categories non-respondent. So this is a voluntary demographic survey. And so it is up to members whether they choose to disclose or not. So it's quite possible that some of our racialized members are actually in that non-respondent category.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. So we'll go back. We'll have to have a motion now to receive the report. Can somebody move the report, please?
Mrs. Nunziata.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. Can I have a seconder?
John Tory here.
Mayor Tory, seconder. Thank you very much. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. We're now moving back to where we were. So we're now on item number 28, which is the quarterly report for August the 15th, 2019 to November 14th, 2019, CEW use. And Miguel, I believe you want to give a deputation on that item as well.
For clarification, I wanted to combine, but since you give me the chance, I can say a few words.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you, Miguel.
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to add to my previous deputation is that I'm in agreement with some of the measures that is the future steps to take on Appendix A of the report. As the city resumes after COVID-19, and I like the conversation that you guys had before early today on item number 3, the policy regarding the COVID-19 disclosure to the attending officers. That will be helpful, especially with people with mental illnesses and other heart conditions. And that will be an alternative or a conversation to have. And I'm so glad that Member Upala brought this issue to the conversation, because that can, at the end of the day, save a lot of hardships and problems. That if officers are aware of the mental and the health conditions of the people in crisis, then they will apply the necessary de-escalation techniques in view of the medical conditions. That's my 2 cents that I want to end it up right here, and I leave it right there with you guys. So it's up to you guys to whether to listen to the experts or the people that comes to your meetings every month. And we hope that the next meeting in June is public. I think Chris and Derek has asked the board to to resume the meetings that we have had in the past. I like the boldness on the steps to take the service around the city to get feedback from the communities. And this is also part of the conversation that we should have as we open up the city for business. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel. Appreciate your deputation. Any questions of the deputant? Hearing none, can I have a motion to receive this report?
I do go attend Shaker.
Thank you. Ms. Chandrasera, seconder. I think I heard two voices. Can I have a seconder of the motion?
Marie Molnar will second.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Molnar. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. Item number 29, which is the annual report 2019 Parking Enforcement Unit Parking Ticket Issuance. I believe we have one deputant, and that would be Derek.
So, Chair Hart, before I begin, Kingsley brought up an interesting question. Did you guys get the written submissions for each of the items I'm speaking on today?
Yes, Derek, and thank you very much. I believe we got written submissions for 3 of your items, I think, and they've all been circulated. And thank you very much for providing those.
Okay, here we go. So for this item, my written submission is titled, "This is a notice regarding the questions Councillor Gord Perks had regarding parking and/or traffic tickets at Budget Committee earlier this year. When the Toronto Police Services was summoned to Toronto City Hall at the beginning of the year for the annual begging for money each department has to go through at Budget Committee, Councillor Gord Perks had questions regarding parking and/or traffic tickets. Take notice that Councillor Perks has commented before on the accuracy of information that staff presents to Council. So I provided a tweet from Councillor Perks on Twitter, January 18th, 2017. He says that there are doubts about the accuracy of information staff present to Council is itself deeply troubling. Government must have public trust. Take notice when Councillor Perks questioned regarding enhanced security measures at Toronto City Hall, as an example. City Solicitor Wendy Wahlberg responded partly with, "In our view, it would be prescribed by law." But she didn't explain to him how it was prescribed by law or where it was prescribed by law so he could go read it for himself. So fast forward to Budget Committee. Earlier this year, take notice when Councillor Perks asked at Budget Committee to the City Solicitor, "Is there anything in law that says that it must be the Toronto Police Service that issues parking and/or traffic tickets?" City Solicitor Wendy Wahlberg responded, "Parking tickets are enforcement of city bylaws, so while I don't believe in theory that enforcement has to be done by the police, there may be practical reasons for it being done by the police." Councillor Perks says, "I'm just asking in law," Wendy Wahlberg. And with respect to Highway Traffic Act enforcement, I'm not prepared at this point to answer that question. Take notice in the Ontario Superior Court case below, former City Solicitor Anna Kinistowski admitted that the City Solicitor's advice has been proven wrong before by the courts. This is from Toronto Party for a Better City versus City of Toronto 2011 team. He also points out, it says in this case, he also points to Ms. Kinistowski's evidence in which she testified, question, "And has the City Solicitor's advice always been upheld by the court?" Answer, "I wish I could say that it was, but we provide by professional obligation is to provide advice, and that advice from time to time is tested by the courts, and we have been proven wrong before." Take notice, this is what the Alberta Court of Appeal had to say in regards to all persons being legally bound to take notice of the laws of the country where they are. Nielsen versus Underwood, 1933. All persons are legally bound to take notice of the laws of the country where they are domiciled. And take notice, the Ontario Court of Appeal in the case below mentioned, the requirement that state conduct be prescribed by law. This is from the famous Langenfeld versus Toronto Police Services Board case from 2019. The Ontario Court of Appeal said, this is one good thing that Chris can take away from this case. the Court of Appeals mentioned that with respect, this analysis confuses the requirement that state conduct be prescribed by law. Again, back to what Councillor Perks asked of the city solicitor twice. Take notice the Supreme Court of Canada in the case below mentioned that all exercises of public authority must find their source in law. This is the famous Dunsmuir case, Dunsmuir versus New Brunswick, 2008. By virtue of the rule of law principle, all exercises of public authority must find their source in law. By acting in the absence of legal authority, the decision maker transgresses the principle of the rule of law. So like not once but twice, Councillor Perks has tried to ask the city solicitor, Wendy Wahlberg, where does it say that? Where is it prescribed by law? Where does it say that in law? And she hasn't done it. She either can't do it or she just doesn't want to do it. But take notice the Supreme Court of Canada in the case below mentioned that government's sole claim to exercise lawful authority rests in the powers allocated to them under the Constitution and can come from no other source. I know I repeated this earlier, but it bears repeating again. This is from the reference regarding the secession of Quebec, 1998. The Constitution. Is it really?
Yeah. Went quickly, I know. Went quickly for me, too.
Hey, wait a second. You guys started the timer when I asked you about my question.
Thank you very much. Okay, Derek, I'll give you 10 more seconds, Derek. Go right ahead.
Okay, so basically, they may not transgress its provisions. Indeed, their sole claim to exercise lawful authority rests in the powers allocated to them under the Constitution and can come from no other source. Dun-dun-dun.
Thank you, Derek. That was helpful. Appreciate it. Any questions of the deputy? Hearing none, can I have a motion to receive, please? Motion to receive?
Francis Nunziata.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. Can I have a seconder?
Marie Mulliner.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. The last item we have before us today is item number 30, which is traffic enforcement and collision reporting processes related to cyclists in the City of Toronto, held down by Mayor Tory. Mayor Tory?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just have some questions to ask of the service, if I might.
Go right ahead.
Okay. First of all, I would like to ask, just to have the service confirm, I don't know who's answering the questions, that traffic responsibility is in fact the responsibility of all officers. I think sometimes it's misunderstood that there's only a certain very few or nobody who's actually out there responsible for enforcing the traffic laws.
Chief?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. All frontline officers are responsible for traffic enforcement and traffic safety or roadway safety.
All right, and can you confirm that there is, within that overall police service, a traffic services unit, and how many officers are specifically assigned to the traffic services unit?
Yeah, for more detailed, Superintendent Scott Baptiste, who is the commander there, you could answer, please.
Sir, we have approximately 300 officers in traffic services, and about 2/3 of those officers are frontline on the road, partaking in that type of enforcement.
Thank you. So the board, as it notes in the report, it's a very helpful report. The board notes that there was, and we remember, of course, that we established and approved the funding for a Vision Zero team to help with, I think what you call, I forget the name of it in the report here, Big Four offense enforcement. First of all, can you confirm that that team was in fact staffed by overtime and that it has been active, and perhaps tell us the date from which that team has been active on its work?
Of course, January 6th was the date at which we commenced operations. We've been operating straight through with approximately a 3-week downtime due to the initial COVID-19 restrictions and some concerns regarding the interaction, that frequent interaction between motorists and the police officers. And we were able to remedy those concerns and rolled some training for officers, etc. And we are continuing to do so 6 days a week, 8 assignments per day, and to date, as of yesterday, we've issued 10,704 charges.
Thank you. That's the question I had later. And just can you confirm that those 8 assignments that you made reference to that have been in place since January the 6th are assigned to the, I'll call it in your report, I think you called the big 4 offenses and in hotspot areas? Is that how you go about deciding where those people will go on a given day?
Yes, that's correct. They are assigned by intelligence. We look at collision data that we have looked at and analyzed in partnership with Toronto Transportation. We have 5 high priority enforcement corridors identified in each of the 17 divisions across Toronto. And we are assigning the officers to those enforcement corridors because we believe that they have the highest likelihood of a potential for safety improvement through this type of directed enforcement.
Thank you. And then it says in the report that this this new group that we agreed to fund last year, the Vision Zero team, will be fully staffed by, I'll call it permanent police officers, but not until Q4. Is there any chance that that process could be accelerated because it's already, we're at Q2 now, the end of Q2. Could we possibly see that group staffed with the permanent, as they call it, permanent people, but before then at all?
Mr. Mayor, it's Deputy Coxon here. So we've looked at that, and I can say 2 things. We can't permanently staff it until Q4 because that will be the next large class that will be deployed of new recruits. Having said that, we have strategically staffed up traffic services beyond what it was at last year, specifically to enforce not just this initiative, but others as well.
Thank you. That's good news to hear. Just had a couple of questions now, just to finish up, Chair, on bicycles. Could you give a bit of a status report on the advocacy? And I'd like to be able to be helpful if I can. It was said in the report that in order to get dooring incidents included as a collision and thereby bring into effect some of the legal requirements and reporting requirements for dooring, which is something that you catalog in here, happens hundreds of times. Is there some advocacy taking place to the province to get the requisite rules and regulations changed to include dooring as a reportable offense, as it were, or a reportable incident?
Yes, Superintendent Baptist again, Mayor. Yes, there has been. We've been working closely with the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police in doing advocacy efforts with the province. There's been a lot of discussion with the Ministry of Transportation. And through this OACP initiative, a formal letter to the Minister of Transportation has been sent requesting that this entire matter be reviewed and that legislative change be implemented to address it.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I didn't know that the letter had been sent, and I'll send one of my own to back it up. Whether that helps or hurts, I think it might help. Now, there's a couple of things that are referred to in the report, one of which is an online remote option. This has to do with people going to the reporting centers, which are located a little bit away from the downtown, and in response to that, there was a online remote option. Is that up and running, or is it about to be up and running? This is for reporting, say, a dooring collision incident or a cyclist collision incident.
Superintendent Baptist again, Mayor. We're working through just a couple of glitches right now with the system. We should be up and running with that within the next month or 2. Our biggest concern in doing this and entering into this pilot project is the potential for greater numbers of fraudulent or exaggerated reporting, and we're trying to ensure that we have sufficient controls in place to ensure that this system has integrity and that we can thoroughly evaluate it.
And then finally on this, there was to be a kiosk, the report references, installed in Liberty Village, again, to try and make it easier for downtown incidents or downtown people to report in. Is that in place, or is it going to be in place?
It's the same issue, Mayor. The kiosk itself is essentially creating a tablet sort of environment with support staff and a 24/7 or a phone support system. So getting that kiosk up and running is not the biggest challenge. The bigger challenge is working the glitches out of the online reporting system, ensuring that we're ready to go.
Thank you. Those are my questions, Chair. I'd like to say a few words on the item when we get to that, in case there are others who have questions. Thank you very much to the police officers, too.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? Hearing none. Mayor Tory, would you like to speak?
Only to say, Chair, this is a very important item to me, and I think it's a very important item to a lot of people across the city. And there have been a number of questions raised, which are legitimate questions, but I think also we've received some very legitimate answers this afternoon with respect to what happened with an initiative that I'm proud of that I took and that the City Council took, and then the board in possession of a funding commitment took to establish under the leadership of the chief this unit as a permanent unit. And in fact, it was restoring something that was done away with in, I think, 2013. Which was a group of people who were going to take the hot spots and the hot issues, I think they call them the big four in this report, and adopt more rigorous enforcement to protect cyclists and pedestrians from careless drivers. And I will just say that I'm pleased. I wanted to get a little more detail than was in the report. I'm pleased with the answers given by the superintendent and by the deputy chief on this, because I think we're moving forward. And what we didn't do is wait for the staffing to happen on a permanent basis, but rather took officers on overtime and put them onto this on January the 6th. You can't do it much faster than in the new year than that, and got them working. And the only thing I would like to ask for, and I'm quite happy I should just ask for it by way of being noted in the minutes, or I could move a motion. It's fairly straightforward. I wondered if in maybe a couple of months, mindful of the chief commenting earlier on about the the work that I know the officers are doing on the pandemic, and excellent work it is across the board, that we might just get a report from the superintendent about the enforcement. He made reference to one statistic, 10,000 tickets, which again, I'm sometimes a little shyer about how many tickets we've issued to people who are not distancing themselves in the parks, although that's a very serious matter as well. I am not shy about wanting to see more tickets issued to more of these careless and inconsiderate drivers who are causing injuries and death to pedestrians and cyclists. And so I think that number, together with perhaps some other numbers that the superintendent might supply us with for the first, say, 9 months, if we saw it in the fall, of this unit's existence, would prove that it is doing what it was intended to do. And it was one of the best investments we could ever make, not in financial return, but in safety, increased safety, and catching up with people who are just thumbing their noses at the traffic laws. So I can just simply move that, if I can, Chair, that the police service be asked to report to a future meeting of the board in Q4 on the facts and figures to do with the enhanced enforcement brought about as a result of the existence of what I think is called here the Vision Zero team. I'm just trying to find the reference to it that's in it, but whatever it is, the staff can fill that in, and then we can see what those numbers are when we get a chance to review it in the fall. And thank you, by the way, thank you to the police service and to the superintendent and the deputy chief and everybody involved in getting this going, and good luck with getting the staffing done, and also the kiosk and the online reporting option for the dooring, which I think is as well is a very serious issue. There's a lot of people that get doored, and it could lead to even deaths of people, and we've got to come to grips with that too, and at least have a proper reporting system, if not better than that.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I'd be happy to second that motion, and we'll ensure that that's included in the minutes for a report back in the fourth quarter. Any other members have wish to speak on this item or have any further questions? Hearing none, can I have a motion to receive this report? Mayor Tory, would you like to do that?
So moved, Chair.
Seconder. I have a seconder, please.
Francis Nunziata.
Thank you, Councilor Nunziata. All in favor? Opposed? Hearing none opposed, that item is carried. Before we wrap up, I believe Mr. Teschner has something he wanted to mention.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very quickly, the board is contemplating potential changes to the board's procedural bylaw, and as required by the bylaw, it's necessary for us to provide some notification of this. Section 26.2 of the bylaw states that the board will only consider amendments or a repeal of its bylaw at a board meeting if at a previous regular board meeting there was notice received of the proposed amendments or repeal. At this time, we're intending to bring forward a report potentially for the board's next meeting scheduled for June 19th, 2020, but that date is subject to change. This report will recommend some modifications to the current bylaw. The modifications relate to a variety of matters, including the duties of the chair and who they may be delegated to, the allowance for varying locations for the regular meetings of the board and modifications related to virtual meetings, the use of translators by deputants, and clarification of the rules of debate at the board. So with that notice provided, a future report will come forward with the individual changes outlined clearly for the board's consideration down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teschner. Before I look to adjourn the meeting, I just want to remind everybody that our next meeting is scheduled for Friday, June the 19th. The time and location will be announced closer to that date when we have more fulsome information around our current COVID situation. So the next meeting is Friday, June the 19th, time and location to be determined. Can I have somebody move adjournment of this meeting?
Mrs. Nunziata.
Councilor Nunziata, thank you. A seconder?
Marie Moliner.
Vice Chair, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.